Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Mikhail here, helping you to connect and secure Web3. This is a two-part episode that I'm going to bring to you. In this episode, I interview Alphak3y of Poolshark. We discuss the importance of privacy in crypto, as well as the next narrative. So I think you'll get a lot of value out of it. It would mean the world to me if you would subscribe to the channel and like this video. It'll help me gauge the kind of content to create for you. My goal is to bring you guests that you don't normally hear about. They're not going to be on Cointelegraph. They're not going to be on Decrypt. They're not going to be covered by other content creators. They're only covered by me because I work in the industry. And so I'm very well connected with many of the builders building in the space. Thanks for tuning in. Sit back, relax, listen to this episode with Alphak3y of Poolshark. Alphak3y, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. What's interesting about this specific episode that I'm recording is that this is the first time I'm doing an episode without the cameras. So you're my first guest with no cameras. How does that make you feel?
I mean, amazing. I'm surprised that I'm the first guest that has not used a camera before.
You know, it's I think it's there's a fine line here. I see that in crypto there's a lot of founders building amazing tech, and a lot of them want to preserve their privacy, and I fully respect that. And then there are some founders that are very transparent, very open about who they are. They have a LinkedIn profile, they come on and they have their cameras on. So in some ways you can argue that I'm taking a risk by doing it this way, but I believe in sharing all perspectives. And so if preserving privacy is extremely important to you, I want to understand like why is that so important, right? And so I wasn't going to shy away from having you on just because we were going to have the cameras off. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm still working on having the cool like 3D webcam avatar thing, but I think there's definitely an opportunity with Web3 to kind of reset the expectations of kind of how we interact with each other. And I think for myself, I feel like online personas are like almost a completely separate thing potentially than um, what happens in the real world, simply because we have different senses that are engaged when we're doing this stuff online. I think when you add more senses into the medium, so like your visual, um, as you add more senses, it becomes a more complete experience. But yeah, that's ultimately what I believe is like what happens online should stay online. We should see that as separate from our real world life, where um, we have to sort of face things differently, and there's different senses that are engaged when we're sort of in person.
That's a very interesting perspective. I haven't really thought about it that way, but it makes a lot of sense because sometimes whenever you're entering into like a bake off or some kind of taste testing and they'll blindfold you and force you to really focus on the actual like using your senses on your tongue and your mouth to taste it. And that taste becomes a lot more I guess
Pronounced.
yes, pronounced. Yeah. So in this particular case, it would allow me to better focus on listening to you and understanding you versus seeing image or getting distracted by something floating around in your background maybe. So that's a very interesting perspective that you gave me. I'll definitely take that into consideration. Alpha Key, I was at Permissionless in September, and there was a gentleman that came up to me, and he was just asking questions about privacy, like why is it so important to people? And then I found out that he works for the IRS. And I guess because by day I work for a security firm, he felt like maybe I would have an insight into why is that so important for a lot of people in crypto? Like what are we hiding from? And so being that you're somebody that likes to embrace, privacy and not having all of your information out there, if let's say this gentleman was in the room with us today and listening in, like what would you tell him? Why is that so important?
Yeah, so I think when you operate in the public sphere like that, where I mean, he's sort of as somebody who works for the IRS, you're looking at everybody's records, right? So seems weird that someone would want to uh, hide some information, but I'm sort of a believer in people should have sovereignty over their information. um, they should have control over what is presented to parties. Like obviously for government stuff, it makes sense. Like, hey, I'm going to display all of my transactions if I'm obligated to pay taxes or something like that. Totally makes sense. But I think it's to me, it's like it's not that people are trying to hide anything so much as having the sovereignty over the data gives the power back to the person whom that data is connected to or belongs to. And so I believe that, like, just kind of by default of how all of these internet applications rolled out, they all rolled out with it being assumed that there was no privacy, right? That some company was having all of your information, even though the uh, IRS or whomever will probably tell you like, hey, it's not a good idea to give out your social security, social security number. U.S. citizens are still giving out their social security number to different companies, right? And so it's like the social security number is like your private key, but then you're just supposed to give it out to parties that you trust. So there's this weird catch 22 with even information that we might share with other companies that we trust today. But I always see this opportunity with, sort of ZK privacy and other privacy tech that the consumer has the ability to take back control of their information so that parties have to offer them something to get that information. Right now we just blindly provide our information to YouTube, to Google, and those provide us with great services, right? And those services are now readily available for anyone in the world to use. But what if the next generation of users decide, hey, we want sovereignty over our data, and by having sovereignty over our data, we can actually force these companies to provide us with something for providing that data. So I think it's just all about optionality. Crypto is very much a consumer plus thing, right? Like the major users of crypto as a technology of these blockchain networks are really first and foremost to me. It's like people that actually don't have access to, for example, like the U.S. dollar, a stable coin. Countries like Argentina that can hold stable coins to protect against inflation. So I think it's really hard to sit here and say like who are going to be the users of this technology in 10 plus years. Uh, for me, it's about having the optionality. Hey, if for some reason um, a user can't get service from some bank or they no longer want to use their bank, they have the option, right? Initially, the internet was not private as well. We didn't have HTTPS. All of our information was traveling over HTTP without any security, right? So anyone could listen in and say and see your packets getting sent to, hey, this is your credit card number. Thank you very much. I'm going to take that now. And then, of course, we had to enable privacy. So, like, privacy on blockchains is kind of like HTTPS, where people can't read your personal information that's getting sent over the airwaves.
At what point in your life did you have your aha moment where you said, look, self sovereignty is the North Star?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was when I really got back into crypto in early 2021, uh, being able to use these technologies on different chains and that, and just see like, it definitely took me time because when I first started playing around early 2021, I was on centralized exchanges, and then I went to yield farms on Binance Smart Chain. That was the first thing that kind of, you know, got me to uh, uh, play around with this sort of uh, amusement park of all the on-chain stuff that's there, right? Like yield farms and things of that nature. So then kind of looking at just paying more and more attention to how certain assets are set up. Like for example, the first BNB ever issued was issued on Ethereum, and that kind of led me to this idea of like, okay, Ethereum's kind of like a vault where you securely store your assets. And the whole value of this space, right, is that you have, um, by having this decentralization, the risk being spread amongst a bunch of providers, that allows me as an individual to come in and have effective custody over my own assets. And yeah, I think once you start following down that train of thought, then you realize like, okay, well, if what can we have self sovereignty of beyond assets? And then of course you would think to the internet, and this being a highway for information, and then it's like, okay, we can have also sovereignty over our information, and choose as to who we reveal that data towards, um, instead of operating in a manner where you're just not really knowing what's being done with your data, right? Like we've kind of been having that obscurity from a user perspective for quite some time. We don't know what's being done with our data, and I think it makes sense. Like if there ever becomes a point in time that users want to have sovereignty, they have that as an option.
When you said that you got back into crypto, you started off exploring the Ethereum ecosystem. What do you think is the next narrative here after this Bitcoin ETF? I mean, a lot of people are already onto Ethereum ETF, and now we've seen a little bit of a price action from Ethereum. I mean, what do you personally think is the next narrative here in 2024?
Yeah, it's really interesting because if you're playing the sort of what's next in the adoption curve, we know that, for example, the Ethereum Foundation have been trying to get governments to stake ETH for quite some time. I wish I could give you an up. You'll have to ask the Ethereum Foundation. I'm not really sure how that uh, process is going, but I definitely think that a big narrative for 2024 is going to be, I mean, we've already seen it play out with Celestia. I think there's going to be a lot to follow in terms of how do we create this modular stack of having these different layers, and how does that impact the scalability of the blockchain. So for example, um, I've been focused a lot on Fuel, which is a layer 2 network over the last couple years, and just looking at the ability that they have to sort of re-architect the EVM. Their big push is to get rid of ERC20 approvals. So, but beyond like the user experience things that will be tried and tested in the market, there's also the yield narrative that we've seen too, right? Like these yield-bearing L2s such as Blast and Manta, and that seems to be the major narrative that we're going to be watching for Q1, Q2, and kind of seeing how does that play out? Does that result in long-term stickiness? I'm sure some people have their ideas already of how that's going to play out, but I guess we'll just kind of see how things go. But yeah, I think the space is pretty wide open in terms of uh, narratives that can pop up. I think also what we're seeing is that there's a lot of new protocols, new technologies, and those newer technologies that are being launched are having a little bit more friction in terms of kind of getting past that cold start phase. So it's really interesting the lendiness effect that has sort of we've sort of seen play out over time. And I mean, my TLDR is I don't really know what is the next narrative, but there's definitely ones that people are pushing. DPIN, for example, physical infrastructure. That's something that, of course, has been around for a while. Some have argued that Bitcoin is DPIN because it's infrastructure for transacting this asset, Bitcoin. And yeah, I think we'll just have to wait and see what emerges. But it's funny to say like, man, you think to some extent like, have we run out of cards? What do you think?
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to get access to the second part of the interview. We discuss the future of Ethereum and Layer 2 solutions, the importance of developers building on top of Arbitrum, and exclusive insights into Poolshark Finance. Catch you in the next episode.